The story about the red-haired Indians who died in the cave has received some support from archaeological records after it was discovered by a company that was harvesting guano from the cave. I will now read some accounts of the discovery of the cave from the 1929 book, LoveLock Cave by Llewellyn L. Loud and M.R. Harrington. John T. Reed, a mining engineer in Lovelock, Nevada, gives the following history of Lovelock Cave. Reed's father ran a general merchandise store at Lovelock from 1883 to 1895, in which the son worked as a clerk. Through this work, he came into contact with all of the Indians of that region, old and young. I recall that along about 1887, when I was about 16 years old, Captain Natchez, two other Indians, one known locally as Coffee Charlie, the other as Mustache Charlie, and myself had undertaken to catch some wild horses that roamed in the neighborhood of the Carson and Humboldt sinks. In due time we came into contact with the wild horses, and then the chase was on. After running those horses all day long, we were obliged to camp overnight near the southern end of the Humboldt Sink, and on its eastern shore. The next morning we resumed the chase, following the horses over into Carson Sink Desert. But here we had to turn around, homeward bound, since we had no fresh saddle horses available to pursue the mustangs further. On the way back we passed Lovelock Cave, and the hour being late we decided to camp there for the night. Later Captain Natchez related to me the great calamity which had occurred in that cave to another race of people, who had been exterminated by the Paiutes. In the tale that Natchez related, with the other two Indians aiding him in bringing out all the material facts that had any connection, I was informed that about 4 or 5 generations back, the Indians had fought to extermination a people who were red-headed and spoke their own language. The fact that these two people spoke the same language suggests that they had lived together for a long period of time. Natchez assigned no reason for the origin of the trouble between the two races, and I doubt if he knew or had a history, although his sister, Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, states that these people were cannibals and ate the Paiutes. This is hardly compatible with her further statement that the Paiutes had taken some of these people into their own families. Annie Lowry, a half-Indian who married an Indian named Mr. Sandy, assigned as a reason for the trouble between the two races that these people had stolen their women and taken their wild rice seed away from them. I rather think that the matter of food was the trouble, and the Paiutes decided after a period of droughts that they would exterminate the other people who were consumers of the small amounts that was all the while getting smaller and smaller, of food that was available in the form of wild seeds and wild fowl that visited the lakes. Natchez stated that these people had come from the southwest. A battle had waged for a long time on the Carson Sink, at some sandhills on the east and west side of the Carson River, after which the Paiutes had driven these people northward into the region of the Humboldt Lake, thence across the lake to the cave, some going into the cave while others went northward. From what I learned through Natchez and from numerous others of the old Indians, I have deduced that this red-headed people had long occupied the territory about the cave, before the Paiute Indians had come from elsewhere. Natchez further related how the Paiute Indians had gathered sagebrush in great quantity around and about the hills adjacent to the cave, and assembled it on the bluff above the cave. Then they had lit it and thrown it down immediately in front of the cave. The Paiutes stayed on either side of the cave at a safe distance, and watched for the people within to come out for food or water, or to escape the smoke which in part penetrated the cave. As they came out, they were dispatched with well-directed arrows. The following account was obtained by Mr. John T. Reed from James H. Hart in regard to the first excavation of Lovelock Cave. In 1911 I heard David Pugh of Lovelock tell of an old Indian cave some 20 miles south of Lovelock. He said that it was full of bat guano in which he had dug down 4 feet. When a boy he had learnt from the Indians where the cave was. There had been fires in it, for there was much smoke on the walls. Realizing that if the cave was as large as described, the guano might be of value, I arranged with Pugh to file a mineral location upon it, and ship out the guano. This we did, working from the fall of 1911 to the spring of 1912. We drove a small tunnel into the mouth of the cave, or rather to one side of it, the natural opening being too small to work through. We took out about 5 carloads of guano, which were shipped to the Hawaiian Fertilizer Company of San Francisco. We soon began to discover Indian relics and notified Dr. J.C. Merriam of the University of California, who took the matter up with the University of Nevada and the Nevada Historical Society. We also wrote to the Smithsonian Institution, but they advised that they had no funds for collecting, receiving only donations. After some of the best specimens had been destroyed, we received word from the State Historical Society that, in conjunction with the University of California, they would send an investigator. This was Mr. Loud. We gave him all possible facilities for collecting. Many objects had been destroyed by the weather and others had been taken away. I recall many boas or ropes of fine feathers. As these lay strewn about in the open end of the cave in the way of the workmen, they were irreparably damaged. Some of these boas were found perfectly preserved. All the Indian objects began to appear about 4 feet below the surface of the guano. In the south end of the cave, about 20 feet deep, we unearthed some skeletons. In the north-central part of the cave, about 4 feet deep, was a striking-looking body of a man, 6 feet 6 inches tall. His body was mummified and his hair distinctly red. There was a grass rope about his neck with a knot under the left ear. The rope was about 8 feet long. The feet were bound together from the ankle to above the knees with stout rope. The mummification was complete except for a part of the abdomen. The other mummies all had red hair. I think there were either 4 or 5. Those that appeared to be women were small, something like a Japanese woman in height. This was not altogether due to the shrinking of the bodies in mummifying, because the man was a giant. The women had on moccasins which reached clear to the knees. The buckskin was beaded with shells. 2 of them had on a kind of buckskin coat or gown that came down to the knees. These bodies were from the deep south end of the cave. There were no bats in the cave when we went there to work. Besides David Pugh, there worked in the cave Samuel Pugh, Hanson, Cummings, and perhaps 1 or 2 others. We screened the guano through a 3/4 inch mesh, discarding everything that did not go through the screen. Probably all objects that passed through the mesh were shipped away with the guano. After we got through working the cave, one George Stotts worked on what was left in the cave for a while. He probably shipped out about a carload of guano. So that's it for this episode about the Paiute Indians of northern Nevada. This was told from the perspective of Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, who wrote this book back in 1883.